Hey everyone, and welcome back. In this series of videos we shall discuss tactics and cooperation for successful plays in the bottom lane in various combos. This summer, the bot lane meta undergone the most significant changes since its introduction. You've probably noticed that in the last month, the position of an ADC was often occupied by champions who are not actual marksmen, for example Swain, Vladimir and Yasuo, who were picked much more often than many marksmen and who proved themselves to be decent picks for this lane. But gradually, Riot Games realized that this meta is not too good and started buffing both marksmen and supports. So in this series we'll go through the main support marksman combos in the bottom lane and clarify a couple of issues that every player comes across. Firstly, what combos are strong in the current meta and how do they interact with each other? Secondly, what is every combo picked for? What are their pros and cons? And finally, what lane tactics do you need to learn and how to arrange the map vision? There will be a lot of parts in this series, so don't be surprised if you don't find the combo you're interested in the most right away. But anyways, let's get started. And we'll start with the first question. What kind of combos are there? The bot lane combos are divided by its support functionality. The marksman's task is always the same. They must deal damage, so this pick isn't as critical as the support pick. There are three kinds of supports in League of Legends: a mage support, a tank support and a utility support. Of course, any player who's played League of Legends for more than a dozen hours understands this theory and successfully uses it. But not all players know about the counter tactics for each support type. Simply speaking, the support's confrontation is like the rock paper scissors game. Mage supports are very effective against utility supports. Utility supports in turn are effective against tanks, and tanks will be a great choice against mage supports. Though this scheme is not too complicated, let's repeat once again. The task of a mage support in lane is constantly poking and harassing their opponents, trying to deny their farm. These supports, such as Brand, Vel'Koz or Xerath, just take the bull by the horns and start pushing the lane at the very first levels. Since the utility supports were mercilessly nerfed in the previous patches, their heals are extremely weak at the early game stages, which means that keeping you and your marksman at full health is mission impossible. So it turns out that mage supports are more effective against utility supports. The task of a utility support is constantly covering and buffing their ADC, who can easily force trades or all-ins. Knowing that there is Lulu or Janna behind them, who'll support them with a huge amount of utility, the marksman can play more freely. They understand that any enemy initiation will be interrupted by Janna's Tornado or Lulu's Polymorph. That's exactly why utility supports are very effective against tanks. The task of a tank initiator is to break in and crowd control their enemies, stun or slow the marksman or the support they're focused on. But utility supports have so many shields and pesky crowd control that they negate any engage. And this is the proof that utility is more effective against tanks. Unlike utility supports, mage supports don't have reliable disengage abilities. Well, they are as squishy as utility supports. And besides high damage, they have no option to counter the initiation of the enemy tanks. So Brand will most likely die if he gets engaged by Leona with Ignite. And this leads us to the last point. Tank supports are most effective against mages. Alright, let's clarify that this scheme is quite approximate and there are many borderline states. For example, Braum or Taric, though they are support tanks, do not have such a strong initiation like Alistar or Leona, but they have some utility. In addition, if you pick Alistar against Brand, it doesn't mean that you will easily win the lane against him. Of course not. A lot will depend on how you'll use your strengths and weaknesses. But according to the statistics and the author's experience, if you use this theory in solo queue, your games will be more efficient. Because you're gonna understand why you take that particular champion and how you should counter your opponent, and what to expect from them. And that means you'll be able to play more carefully and be more focused, thus preventing unnecessary errors or deaths. Great, we've clarified the theory of lane combos and now we'll be able to make conscious champion picks. Let's go directly to the combos. There are 5 of them, as you might already figure out. Marksman plus tank support, marksman plus mage support, marksman plus utility support, fighter plus support and mage plus support. Each of these combos will be discussed in detail in the following videos. And now let's repeat the main points of our first video. Roles. There are 3 types of supports: tank initiators with a lot of health and simple crowd control. Utility supports, whose task is to buff their carry and support their fight initiative. And mage supports, who should win the lane by constantly creating pressure and harassing their enemies. Tactics. Although our theory doesn't guarantee a victory, it still gives an advantage to those players who understand it and can use it in their games. In short, it goes like this: tanks are good against mages, mages are good against utility, and utility are good against tanks. Everything is simple and clear. Alright, in the next part we'll answer the second question of our guide and we'll start analyzing the bot lane combos. Until then, thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and as always, good luck in your solo queue.